Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot on the agenda, full news week since last time we got together. I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm sure our listeners feel the same way. So we had the tragedy in Buffalo, uh, and unfortunately, an opportunity for Biden. He was supposed to be the great uniter after Trump uses it as a political event. Again, we talked about this months ago that he's really not, Joe Lunch Pail. He's really an angry, mean son of a bitch. And to be so callous to, like, remember Reagan when the Challenger blew up? He didn't use it as, like a leverage tool that, our school system sucked because we can't design good things and it's the Democrats' fault. I'm just going, theorizing. He just was so in the moment trying to comfort those and America that were impacted. Biden has no ability to do this.
No, he doesn't. And he's shown in the past that he does not have the ability to show compassion. Remember when he was at the Air Force Base as the bodies of the soldiers that were killed in Afghanistan because he screwed up the withdrawal, and he's standing there looking at his watch. So
That
he
is,
has
and
no compassion.
Dr. Lopin, that is an amazing point. And I think that got short shift even in conservative circles. How cold can you be? These people died because of your stupidity. And even if it wasn't, as a result of your incompetency, I'm just saying people just dying in the line of duty. I mean, what does that say to the families? Put yourself in a mother's or a wife's perspective. Someone in your family, and the president is looking at their watch. That would be
Yeah,
just
I mean,
gut wrenching.
he has no compassion, and he only sees these things in terms of politics. They're claiming a white supremacist attack on the supermarket, and of course he goes up to Buffalo. Now, we also know, if and I'm sure our listeners will remember, an African American plowing into a Christmas parade in Waukesha. Biden still has not visited there.
Because it does
So
not serve his political agenda.
right, it does not fit his narrative. And of course, they've been spinning this because as more information comes out about the shooter, yes, he was a white supremacist. We're not denying that. He had many mental health issues.
He was crazy.
They found that out early on. But he's also a communist and a socialist. He's
and
a
an
Bernie
environmental
Sanders.
wacko.
Yes, he's a Bernie Sanders / squad supporter. And they're blaming the Republicans, going, oh, well, they're encouraging this. No, this guy was as far to the left as you can get, but that doesn't fit their narrative, so they want to squash that part of the story. Is what happened a tragedy? Absolutely. Does it matter which end of the political spectrum is responsible for this? No, but you cannot blame the Republicans when a socialist goes crazy and shoots people.
Agreed. But speaking of enablers, there was a clip on MSNBC. Don't recall his name. The moderator basically was spewing that Fox News has blood on their hands. I mean, talking about stoking the fires of division, it's just off the hook. And thankfully, no one watched it because it's MSNBC, but it's still irresponsible.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the left has nothing else except to stoke division because everything they've tried has failed miserably. The country has been saying this is going in the wrong direction.
75% or over.
Yes. So
And that's
they've
interesting.
got nothing to stand on.
Real quick, is Chuck Todd, no conservative, because that really jarred my memory as well. We talked about this as doing the prep for the podcast, but he last weekend he did a analysis of the last like 30 years of midterm elections and all these different factors that go into play. He was talking about basically that the Democrats are in shellacking territory, and that he even thinks that there's a boxer's chance in even light blue areas like Colorado. Why do I bring this up now? Because we were going to wait further on down in the podcast, because it gets to also wrong track, right track. He brought that out, that if it's like a
Yep.
50-50, that still doesn't bode too well for the incumbent party, but 75 plus in the negative direction, you like he said, shellacking on steroids department.
Yeah, the Democrats are going to be brutally beaten in November. And at this point, everybody expects it. But it keeps getting worse for them because aside from the fact that you've got massive inflation and record-setting energy prices that are pushing people, they see this every day. It's not like, well, if the news doesn't cover it, nobody will notice. This is affecting their everyday lives. So they're already switching to vote for Republicans in massive numbers, especially among minorities. But it's even getting worse because a decision came down in New York. Now, New York lost seats because of the census. So they've been trying to do the redistricting. And of course, the Democrats, being in charge of New York, have been doing everything they can to keep Democratic hold of the state. Well, a judge threw out the Democrats' redistricting, appointed a special master to do the redistricting. This is someone who is impartial. And it came out today that with these new districts, there's a good chance that New York will be electing more Republicans.
Hmm, interesting. Well, the only thing I would have to say, and I love your advice on this, because it's before I go to bed at night, Dr. Lopkin, I do get a little chill because there's actually a good positive factor for the Republicans out there is a huge gap in enthusiasm in terms of voter turnout. But I would love your analysis. What scares me is Roe versus Wade. Is that enough? If that gets overturned, swing things in a direction against the Republicans.
I don't think it is because, first of all, the decision is scheduled to come out, I believe, in July.
Yes.
So you're going to have, a bit of time between the time the decision comes out and the time people actually go to the polls. But what we've seen is that Roe v. Wade and the possibility of it being overturned actually raises enthusiasm equally on both sides. Because the people that want it overturned and don't want, the pro life contingent, they want to keep that. And they know if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then each of these state elections becomes more important because those are the folks who are going to be making that decision. Same thing for pro choice. They know those state elections are going to be more important. So I think you're going to see Roe v. Wade affect turnout positively. I think more people will turn out, but I think it's going to be pretty evenly split among pro life and pro choice. So it's not going to have that big a decision effect on the outcome.
We'll see. I don't know. I certainly, don't hope so. The only thing that does scare me, you talk about July being so far off from the election. That's good and bad. If you had an October surprise, that's always, a cliche and usually does not bode well for the challenger. But if you have a decision in July, that gives, the left more than enough, the organized Soros left, more than enough opportunity to have a real organized, I'll use the term rebellion.
Yeah, they do have it does give them the time to get organized, but it also gives them the time to calm down. When they see, "Oh, you know what? In my state, nothing has changed," you're going to see a lot of those people go, "Okay, well, it's not that important now."
I think that's a very good factor. The only other thing before we leave this subject is one thing that could backfire on the Dems, because I think even moderates, independents, and even some Democrats have had it up to their eyebrows with the radical, crazy left. So if they take it too far, which you can almost count on, that could backfire as well. I call it the Vietnam effect. Watching the body count
Yes.
every night at 6 o'clock. Same thing. You whatever cable news you're watching at this point, and you got whack jobs in the streets. It just goes, "What? This is just too much."
Well, we are going to see that. I mean, several organizations on the left have already announced this is going to be the summer of rage, and they're going to be taking to the streets and probably being violent. I mean, you don't call it summer of rage if you're peacefully
That
protesting.
ain't exactly
So we
Woodstock Summer of Love, is it?
right. And that tends to backfire because people see the violence and they go, "No, you want to have an opinion, that's great. You want to take it out on the poor store owner that happens to have a location where you're protesting? No, enough is enough."
I agree. And the other factor I think is, yeah, abortion. That's a huge issue. Two things before we leave the subject. Number one, most people, myself included, are. I mean, I'm a pro-choice, but I'm not into killing babies. In other words, up to the point of the actual birth or maybe after. I think that backfires. Chucky Schumer's bill. Most people, most Americans on both sides of the aisle would have a problem with up to the time of birth.
Yes, again, we've seen the polls. 80% of Americans are against late stage abortions, where 60% of all Americans are in favor of having the right to choose up until, the second trimester. So by trying to push it to make it absolute, and quite frankly, the same on the pro life, by trying to ban all abortions, you're actually turning people against you. If they came up with, quite frankly, a reasonable compromise, which the Missouri law that is being heard by the Supreme Court actually is a reasonable compromise, most people would be fine with that. It's when you go to the extremes of either you can always have one or you can never have one, that's when people turn against you.
Excellent. Okay, moving on. Uh, I think pretty much of a bombshell, at least in my opinion. You have Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post and a noteworthy liberal and contributor to Democratic campaigns and causes, attacking Biden, and along with Elon Musk. But now it just came out today, as we speak this Wednesday, that Musk just came out and said next election he's voting Republican. This is further throwing sand I mean, dirt on this half buried administration already. I mean, we talked about this like he could be the only lame duck before his second year in office. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't really surprising. And it's the mistake that the Democrats have been making all along. And it was completely foreseeable because if you take a look at states like California, New York, Connecticut, you saw, well, they raise taxes on the wealthy. They keep saying the wealthy aren't paying their fair share. Well, guess what? The wealthy folks are moving out, and you saw people leaving those states. This is the same thing. Even the most liberal of wealthy people can only take so much when you're saying they're not doing their share. It's their fault. At some point, they're going to say, you know what? Go screw yourself. I don't need to take this from you. And that's what you're seeing now with Bezos.
And
We
Musk.
know Well, and Musk, yes. We know that